Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I explore how technology is impacting our lives, our work, industry, and even world. And I do suspect that for most of you listening, you might be a little guilty of taking constant connectivity for granted and might even have been known to throw a mini tantrum if you cannot get your connectivity fixed. But today I've invited Rick Baldridge on the show from Viasat, who have been connecting consumers, businesses, governments on the ground, in air and at sea for over 30 years. And I'm really looking forward to this one because I've had a lot of great news lately. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Montana, where Rick Baldridge is waiting to speak with us about satellite technology and the great work that they're doing at Viasat. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Rick. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Neil. I'm Rick Baldridge, and I'm the CEO and president of Viasat, Inc. And Viasat's a high-tech communications company really focused on wireless and satellite communications, secure communications. Been around for almost 35 years. The company has been public for well over 20 years, 24, 25 years. So we've had very steady growth through that whole period of time. But kind of the most exciting thing about what's going on is we've invented a whole new class of satellites a few years ago, and we're looking at launching 3 satellites that cover the globe and bring connectivity to everyone.
It really is incredibly exciting work that you guys are doing. And like I said, Viasat is a provider of high-speed satellite broadband services and secure networking systems covering military and commercial markets. But can I ask that you set the scene and tell me a little bit more about who your customers are and the kind of problems that you're solving for them?
Yeah, well, our customers are, you can imagine anybody that wants to be connected like everyone else does, but it's very challenged. It can be a challenged environment, such as a mobile environment. So high-speed aircraft or ground mobile applications, or people that have just been left behind. And our view is that they should be connected just like the people that aren't left behind. So we've invented a whole new class of satellites that we think economically and technically that we can do that. Just because you don't live on Main Street in London doesn't mean that you shouldn't be connected, have the ability to be connected to the internet and the benefits that go along with that. So, for instance, we've connected several thousand villages in Mexico recently, with over 1 million people within walking distance of these villages. Most of those people have never had the ability to be connected with the internet before without traveling to a major city.
And I also read recently that Viasat has expanded its operations in Europe and setting a foundation for its upcoming Viasat 3 satellites by purchasing the remaining 51% share of Euro Broadband Infrastructure, which many will know as EBI. But can I ask that you expand on that for people listening that are only just hearing about it?
Sure. We've had a long-time partnership with Eutelsat in Europe, and so we had formed a joint venture a few years ago, and the two of us have decided to head a different direction in the future from a technical solution standpoint. So it was time to resolve this joint venture, and Eutelsat has new technology coming on board, and so we've acquired the as you said, the remaining 51% of that joint venture. What that does for us is it allows us to get started in a much more robust way ahead of the launch of our satellite that covers the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region, which would be the second satellite in the Viasat 3 constellation. So we can get, our distribution in place, our partnerships in place, our technology rolled out, so that when we show up, we're not showing up flat-footed.
And I think for many people listening, they're probably unaware of just how much satellite technology impacts their entire life. But help listeners understand how your technology would work in a real world situation or their world, can you tell me a little bit more about that full suite of offerings that you offer to both consumers and businesses?
Sure. So, and it can be, you can tailor the solution around the various customers, but we serve people from businesses where we've, in some cases, have combined technologies. So, for instance, satellite with wireless, or satellite with DSL, or satellite with some other terrestrial product, so that you can bond those two together, solve the latency problem as well as the high-speed internet problem, and get 4 nines of reliability to an enterprise. In a resident, you don't need that same type of robust network, which costs a little bit more. So we can serve those with just, a satellite antenna and receiver. And we're providing today services up to 100 megabits per second. So with the next generation of satellites, and when we started in this process, people were getting less than a megabit. So pretty big gains from less than a megabit to 100 megabits. And we're building new class of satellites where we can provide higher speeds than that. So whether you're an enterprise or you're a resident or you're a train, for instance, mobile networks, or a ship, or some type of ferry, we can provide high-speed internet to everybody on that ferry or on that ship. Like we're doing with airlines. We're providing high-speed connectivity with airlines. It's very widely known that we're providing the best service of any service provider in the world. And our view is you ought to be able to do the things in the air, in your seat, that you can do at home.
And I'm curious, as somebody that's been in the industry for some time now, and you've seen a lot of changes, and there's been a lot of changes in the last 12 months, never mind going back 20 years. But I'm curious, how has technology evolved over the last 5 years, would you say?
It's definitely moving at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
We believe that we had somewhat disrupted the market. We entered the market believing that it really wasn't about just getting as much revenue for a satellite slot in the sky that you could. It's really about bringing the types of outcomes to people on the ground that haven't been able to get them. For instance, with these 3 satellites, we'll be able to bring healthcare or education or just access to commerce to people in remote places that have really never had that ability. So there's maybe it's not new, but there's a trend certainly where people have historically had to leave their homes to go be part of the economic community. And there's a lot of people that don't want to leave their homes. They'd like to stay there, but they can't because they don't have access to this type of technology. So we're trying to help solve that problem. We think if we stay focused on outcomes, stay focused on the customer, and invest in a technology that enables that's kind of a winning combination.
And before you came on the call today to record this podcast, I did read, it looks like it's a pretty exciting day for you guys, because Viasat today announced it's been selected by US airline Delta to provide in-flight connectivity on over 300 narrow-body aircraft. That seems like a pretty big deal, isn't it?
It's a great deal. We're very proud to be part of the Delta team. I think they've been very outspoken about a couple dimensions of connectivity, and they pride themselves on providing a very high-end service to their customers. But they didn't have an internet that was capable of matching that brand, and so they searched for that potential provider, and we've been speaking to them for quite a while, and so they know us very well, and they've decided that we are that best option out there, and we're certainly happy to be part of that selection. We hope to be able to earn much more of their fleet in the future.
Absolutely. And something else I always try and do on this podcast is tackle a few myths, misconceptions, etc., on what people may think about a particular technology. So a few questions I've got to ask you. First of all is, I'm curious, how does the weather impact satellite internet? Because I think a lot of people listening will have their own ideas, but I'd love to get it straight from you.
Yeah, there's satellite has definitely had you have to be able to make a connectivity to an antenna on the ground and a satellite up in space, and so there are times when you have weather conditions that can interfere with that. So probably not in things that are flying at 40,000 feet, but certainly homes on the ground that are experiencing those types of situations. So one of the things that we've done is we've designed a network that historically satellites have linked customers to a specific Earth station gateway. And so if that gateway went down, for example, you had a big tornado that went through a part of the country, went through, Paris and took out that specific gateway, that all the customers linked to that gateway would go without internet until that was back online. Well, we've designed a much more robust network where you're not depending on that. And so the reliability of our service to consumers has gone up dramatically since they're not linked to a specific ground station. That's an example of designing a network that's more robust to deal with weather. The other one is where you have a user and he's experiencing weather like snow, heavy snow or heavy rain in a specific area. And we've also added additional technologies that allows that user, in most cases, to stay connected. Maybe not at the same speeds during a certain specific weather event, but in most cases, they can stay connected. So those are examples of how we've integrated weather and weather circumstances into a network that allows our customers to stay online.
And I am curious, are there any other myths or misconceptions in your industry that you'd like to finally lay to rest today? Because I suspect there is a few of them out there that you must read and get a little frustrated with.
Yeah, the whole idea, and I think it really was this way, that if you couldn't get anything else, you chose satellite, right? If I had no other alternatives, then satellite was this my last option. And that's really changed. Like I said, at 100 megabits per second, we're not the last option for many, many people. And what that does is it expands the addressable market for satellite. Also, whether you're on an oil rig, for instance, and we recently made an acquisition of a company called RigNet, which had been focused mainly on oil production services. They have other businesses too in the enterprise space as well. But if you're out there and these guys were excited about getting 2 megabits of service. Well, in oil rig operations, we'll be able to bring those operations much closer to 1 gig. And that can change what they can actually do. It doesn't just lower the cost of the bandwidth they're buying, but it changes the things they can do in that operation and allows them to get much more information off of those platforms. So you can think of the various markets, whether it's farming, highly concentrated elements of IoT, or trains or buses, or just remote enterprises. They'll be able to do things that they never thought was possible because the technology didn't exist. So there's an area where satellite had played a role because it had ubiquitous reach, but really didn't have the amount of, it's like getting a really fine dinner, but leaving hungry. You didn't get enough bandwidth. We're bringing that second plate of food.
And you've had a great start to the year with the Delta Airline deal, and I appreciate it's probably not too much else you can share, but is there anything you can share about your roadmap this year, or the kind of things that you're going to be focusing on at Viasat?
Well, yeah, sure. We've got to get these 3 satellites finished. They're in production, and we've got to get them built and launched and in the air so that we can truly launch this global service. We're doing well in North America. We have a strong start in South America and Brazil, and then in Central America and Mexico and Guatemala, and certainly in Europe with our purchase of the remaining portion of the EBI joint venture, and even work in Australia and recently in Africa. So really focused on getting this Viasat 3 constellation up, getting the local teams hired. We're going to approach this from a local standpoint. So there's an old saying in politics that everything is local. We think that's true in business as well. So we're not just going to fly people in from the U.S. to run these businesses. We're very focused on having local talent. We've got to build those teams. And we have to, things like the Rignet acquisition helped accelerate some of that. We already have multiple airlines in Europe in that area that are using our connectivity service primarily on the KA-SAT satellite over there, but they also transition across the North Atlantic bridge into U.S. and Canadian coverage to the extent that they fly those routes. So it's really getting some additional capabilities in place, getting local teams put in place, getting the constellation and the ground segments rolled out in those markets, and developing deeper partnerships in each one of these regions. So that's what our roadmap is very focused on, as well as next generation user equipment, lower cost terminals, much more capable equipment. And the other piece that's often forgotten is bringing the other elements to this thing. It's not just about connectivity, it's about outcomes. So healthcare, education, banking, those types of tools in these markets so people have access wherever they are.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening that would like to dig a little bit deeper and investigate a little bit more about the kind of work that you're doing at Viasat, or if it's a business lead or decision maker or somebody interested in your products, what's the best way of finding you online and also contacting your team?
Sure. Well, obviously the easiest way is to just viasat.com. But you can also connect with any of our social leads. Most common Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the various social accounts they can reach out on. And we'd love to talk to whoever's interested.
Well, I always say at the end of every episode that technology works best when it brings people together. And what I love about what you've been doing at Viasat here is for more than 30 years now, you've helped shape how consumers, businesses and governments and militaries all around the world communicate and using technology to bring people together. So a big thank you for coming on and sharing that story with me today.
Thank you, Neil. It's been a pleasure.
It sounds like quite an exciting time for Viasat, doesn't it? Especially with those expanding operations in Europe and setting a foundation for its upcoming Viasat 3 satellites by purchasing that remaining 51% of share of Euro Broadband Infrastructure, EBI, which was the wholesale broadband services business that was created as part of Viasat's former partnering agreement with Eutelsat Communications. But when you combine that with the news of the Delta Airlines partnership and how they're upgrading its current in-flight connectivity systems to Viasat's more advanced Ka-band satellite-powered technology, so all customers can use enhanced and reliable in-flight internet, that's incredibly cool too, isn't it? Especially because it will include the ability to be able to stream all types of entertainment and popular over-the-top content to any internet service ready device, gate to gate. But I'm going to be honest with you, there is a side of me that likes the fact that I'm completely off grid and away from notifications and emails on a 10-hour flight at 30,000 feet. Because it's like the last place on earth that you can hide now, isn't it, and go offline. But what about you? If you're going away and you're going on a long flight, do you like going offline, or do you wish you had instant internet access and decent speeds too? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, or if you've got any questions at all, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can tweet me, get me on LinkedIn and Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes, or if you've got anything at all you want to talk about or come on the show, just let me know. And finally, of course, my website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find thousands of interviews that we've recorded on this show and also ways that you could work with me. But once again, we find ourselves at the end of another episode, but we do keep them coming fast and furious. And I'll be back again tomorrow morning with another guest, and we'll explore together another area in technology that's impacting our world, changing our world, or just adding a bit of fun or additional productivity to our lives. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening, and until next time. Don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.